Classic 1022. The factory chassis that the Ruger 1022 Charger comes in is not terrible, but it is definitely kind of a legacy of the old bench rest design. Way back when the Ruger Charger was first introduced, it was absolutely meant to be like a bench rest pistol. So it had a laminate wood chassis. You were meant to shoot it from a bipod with, a red dot or a scope of some kind. When it got reintroduced a number of years ago, it had a polymer chassis that had a metal piece that was removable right on the back, right around there. And that's when Copper Custom came out with their little adapter that could be dropped in and give you an option to screw in a standard AR buffer tube. So you could use stocks or braces or whatever you wanted to on there. The second generation of the new Charger actually came with a Picatinny rail slot on the back, and that's the version that I bought. This one started life as an 8-inch non-takedown Ruger Charger 1022. I did a review of this gun a while back, and I had it configured using this, the SB Tactical FS1913 brace. The current version of the Charger chassis is pretty usable. It does come with the 1913 section on the back for attaching a folding brace, but other than that, it's not very adaptable. There is a sling stud on the bottom of the handguard at the front. That's really more for bipod attachments than anything else. There's really no way you could mount a light on there. There's not a whole lot of options for sling attachments, and it's overall hampered by the original bench rest design. The SB Tactical Chassis does have a couple of minor improvements. First of all, at the back end, you've got ambidextrous sling QDs, which is pretty good, as opposed to the one top-mounted sling QD on the factory chassis, which is really hard to use. This one has a much more ergonomic forend. You can actually get your hand around it. It also has M-lock slots on the sides and on the bottom for mounting stuff. Potentially you could put a grip of some sort down there. This one also has two interchangeable top rail pieces. One of them has Picatinny and the other one is smooth. You can use those for mounting accessories within limits. We'll talk about that, I guess, in a little bit. Like the factory chassis, the SB Tactical just takes regular AR pistol grips. The one that it includes is a Reptilia CQC grip, which not only mates to the lines of the chassis pretty well, but is actually really comfortable. Works super well, I think, on this design. The weight of the new chassis is, I think, within about an ounce or so of the original chassis, so you're not actually saving a lot of weight, but you're also not gaining a lot of weight, even though you're getting seemingly more material. I think it's just a lighter weight, thinner plastic. Optic height on this thing is a little bit tricky. Everything's pretty much in line. You don't actually have all that much drop, so a super low-mounted red dot doesn't really feel all that good. If you have a red dot with an absolute co-witness mount, it's probably pretty decent. Lower 1/3 is starting to get a little bit high. This one has got a SIG Sauer Romeo 5 in a Strike T1 Rex riser. So because it's a Romeo 5, it sits a little bit higher than it would normally. So it's not exactly absolute co-witness, but it's pretty close. And that's a pretty decent height. Maybe there'd be some sort of intermediate height in between a super low mount and a lower or an absolute co-witness mount. That would be a little bit better. I did try mounting a Bushnell TRS-25 on a very small Picatinny riser. That was pretty good. That's just not a great red dot, so I definitely prefer this setup here. This has got a Streamlight Protect 2 rail mount light on an Arisaka offset scout mount, and then the tape switch is attached to the top rail section, which is overall a pretty ergonomic and usable setup. Gives it a little bit of tactical 22 pretensions, but it's actually quite fun to shoot and definitely usable. This chassis is still far from perfect. The main problem really is that we're working with a really small footprint. So this is still pretty cramped up front. If you actually want to mount any other sort of accessories, it gets a little bit difficult. The light and switch here is basically the limit of what we can do. And that also means that there's not a good way to put a 2-point sling on here. You're pretty much limited to using a single point sling attached to one of those rear QDs, which is probably fine because this is a fairly short and very lightweight system. The other problem is that this thing is just a little bit on the plasticky side. Both the Picatinny top rail section and the smooth one are screwed into the bottom of the chassis. They're both made out of plastic, and they're held in with these like self-tapping wood screws almost. So you've got a screw that just sinks itself straight into plastic, and that doesn't really inspire a lot of confidence. Particularly, I'm a little worried to remove it because I don't know how well it's going to attach the next time. Like right now, very solid, but if I have to remove it and reinstall it, it probably is not going to end up as solid. And that's kind of an issue because you can't take this thing apart to clean it unless you can get it out of the chassis. Same story with the bolt that attaches the chassis to the action of the gun. On the original Ruger 1022 and Charger chassis, the chassis itself is reinforced with a big metal insert. Certainly a little more solid and a little bit more durable. Every time you have to take this thing apart to clean it, you're putting probably a significant amount of wear on these plastic fasteners, which is not all that great. However, again, this thing is very cheap, so it's sort of acceptable, and also it's sort of a consumable in a way. So could you mount a laser device to that top rail section for use with night vision? Yes, you could. I mounted a D-Ball i2 on there and got a quick and dirty zero and did some plinking with it. Is that going to be super durable? Is it going to hold zero particularly well for long range? No, but again, you're attaching it directly to a plastic section of rail, and that rail itself is attached to a plastic chassis with some fucking wood screws. Probably the nicest feature of this chassis is that the 1913 section here aligns perfectly with an SB brace, which makes sense. This is an SB chassis, SB brace, it should line up perfectly. On the factory chassis, the brace, regardless of if you have it up or down in the left or right folding position, it just kind of overhangs on the top or the bottom and looks kind of crappy and gives you a nice big chunk of sharp metal to scrape yourself on. So that's just a super nice little touch. A lot of the other aftermarket chassis available for the Charger are made out of solid aluminum, so they are a little bit heavier and more expensive, and they kind of hew too closely to the original bench rest design. They don't really give you any added functionality that this chassis doesn't for quite a lot less money, and I believe a little bit less weight as well. One chassis that I actually think looks really good and will probably be a significant improvement over anything currently on the market is the one that was announced by Strike Industries at SHOT Show 2022. That one is going to have a full length of uninterrupted Picatinny across the top. So it's going to be sort of a monolithic chassis design, and it's still going to retain the 1913 mount on the back. So until Strike Industries comes out with their chassis, this one is perfectly fine, or if you don't really give a crap about trying to put a night vision device on the rail, this one is probably just fine otherwise. The ergonomics and the layout of this chassis just make it a lot nicer to shoot than the factory Charger chassis, and the fact that you can mount weapon lights to it is kind of a neat bonus as well. So anyway, let me know what you guys think. Talk to you later. Peace.